Welcome to the Open Gospel. This is my third episode. I get to repeat with John. This is he was the guest on the very first opening of this podcast. I just needed to work out the kinks. I'm currently working out kinks as we speak. So things went well with last episode with Brian, and now I figured we can have a better go our second time around.
Yeah.
We spoke a little low on the first episode. It was the most challenging episode for me, and I think it will be always the most challenging because of it was my first time in that atmosphere. So it was terrifying for me. I'm getting way more comfortable now, but we have so much to talk about. I guess I want to start with, because we talked a little bit before this, I want to start with your childhood, because you had a fun one.
Right. Yeah, so my childhood. I don't know where you want to start.
Let's start with, so you're what, 50? 51.
Yeah.
Born in?
Year?
Yeah.
73.
Okay, so hippie era.
Yeah.
Okay. You want to start with who your dad is, your mom is?
Well, yeah, I can start there.
Okay.
A little bit of background information, I guess. Vietnam, born in Vietnam, Saigon, right? Ho Chi Minh City, as it's called. But
You were born in Vietnam?
yeah.
Why did I not know that?
Yeah, born in Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh City, as it's called now, but supposedly the locals don't call it that.
Okay.
They still call it Saigon. So born there. Dad was a Vietnam vet. Mom was a worker, local, national, worked on post, and that's how they met.
Okay.
My mom was married when they met. Had to do some illegal paperwork for my dad and her to get married, and came here when I was 6 months old. I tell this story a lot to the fellas here. I tell a lot of stories. If we're only going to go for an hour or so,
If we go two, that's fine. I know that last episode with Brian was 2.5 hours. There was a point in that podcast where I got winded. It almost felt like, and maybe it's because I'm new to it, right? So I'm still learning, and it almost says it's intensive for me. Like right now I'm calm, but there's moments where certain conversations came up, and I got tense. By the 2-hour mark, dude, I felt like I got in a fight. So I was exhausted. I was shivering because it was cold, and I think a little bit of it was that nerves involved. You know what I mean? How they all intertwine. But
Okay.
So if it goes 2 hours, it goes 2 hours. I'm not worried about it.
That's fine too. So Dad was drafted. He was a country boy. Wrote a book. If anybody's interested in learning more,
What's the book called?
I think it's called The Forgotten Vietnam Veteran. It's on Amazon.
Wow.
Or if for some reason the person wants it and can't get it, if you reach out, I can work it so that you can get the book. And the book is primarily about his life as a drug smuggler, not a drug dealer, a drug smuggler that moved product from country to country, which I grew up in that atmosphere. Grew up being told from little on up that I would take that business and have it as my own. But
So he treated it as a business.
Yeah.
Was that like a primary income? Because Vietnam era, they didn't get paid well, right?
No, they didn't. No, it was good money. So it was probably 74, I guess. His first shipment, he made $30,000, which was a lot of money back then.
Holy moly!
From one shipment,
compared to the $1 a day for the military, whatever it was.
Right. I think I'm guessing that was $200 a month they were getting paid, roughly.
Wow.
Or probably less. But regardless, yeah, it was a lot of money back
While in service?
No, that was after he left.
So he didn't do this while in uniform. When he retired out of the uniform, that's when he...
Right.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. When he got
Makes more
discharged, he came back to pick my mom and I up and smuggled the first shipment in my diaper. So, that was sort of involved. My mom was involved from the beginning.
Wow, I feel like you need to be on Sean Ryan's podcast.
I don't know.
This would be a great start.
I don't know if my life is that interesting.
It starts out with the diaper being full of money or drugs, whatever it was.
Heroin, yeah.
Heroin. Wow.
Yeah, when heroin was heroin, now it's not. But very familiar with the industry and the life.
Okay.
Growing up around it, met a lot of seedy people at a young age. He would take me along on some adventures and met a lot of people. So.
All right, so you got Papa was a Rolling Stone. You got Mommy who's just taking care of you. Now she's still alive, right?
She is, yeah.
Well, that's good. Let's see. I guess we can go right into how did that lifestyle, being raised by a dad who's kind of a, what's the word I'm looking for? He was
so my dad was a, what's the word? He was a not a hooligan. Words on the tip of my tongue. He was a not an outcast, a hoodlum.
Okay.
More or less.
All right. That's one way to explain it.
Yeah. So one of the events of a Vietnam vet is they tend to they tend to find each other and hang out together.
Okay.
So growing up, I hung out with a lot of Vietnam vets, older folks, of course, and I was just a kid, and I was there. I felt as though I was their little Vietnamese boy, because they spent so much time in country and in that environment that Vietnam became a part of their life. And when they saw me and my mom, and it was an environment that took them back to that life-changing event of their lives. A lot of the drafted people, drafted guys. So they took well to me, and my mom and my dad, of course,
right?
Because he was such a hoodlum. And those drafted folks were uneducated, came back uneducated, just blue collar workers that were against the system. So I spent quite a bit of time with those guys as a little kid.
Yeah.
So that lifestyle went on for, 40 years of a drug smuggling career, and seen a lot of people, and the house was raided by the DEA twice. Growing up as a kid, there's a ton of stories and all of that, but there's a lot there I could talk about.
I know that I want to obviously dive down a little bit further with you, but I do want to hear more about your dad as well. So when he was done the 40-year drug smuggling job,
career,
career, and being I can't get the word. I don't know why. I'm going blank with the word of what that individual would represent in society. However, but he was that, right? So when he retired, what was his life like?
So he never retired. He died before he retired. Worked up to the.
Well, he got out of the drug program.
No, not well.
Wait, are you saying until the day he died, he pretty much was still involved in some way?
It wasn't. No, not that he was really involved. But
okay.
So the last deal that he made was moving products from Mexico across the border, so every time he got busted by luck, he did almost no time. For whatever reason, it was all luck. So he got the last time he got busted, he was moving bales of marijuana across the Mexican border, the U.S. border.
So I'm assuming being raised by somebody in that kind of environment,
right?
did that rub off on you to have a life of your own that involved some type of uncivilized behavior?
Oh, absolutely, and it's very natural. There should be a study done. I'm not aware of one of the kids of war veterans. Even if you look at the GWAT, Global War on Terrorism veterans, their kids are affected, and not only are the service members dramatically affected by their events overseas in war, the kids are dramatically affected too. And
real quick, I'm gonna have you scoot in. I want to see if
sure.
Yeah, there you go.
Sure, and that, I believe that's probably an unstudied scenario.
So you're saying children, even in the GWAT, would have probably the same?
Yeah, because the folks come home and they have anger issues, suicidal issues, etc. And that affects their kids, and in the home life, and those kids are neglected. They're not part of any system to get help.
Sure. And we know how the government works with that as well. They put the programs in place not because of the intention of actually helping people, but because it's saving their face. It's all comes down to money, right?
A lot of it does, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They don't actually care.
Yeah.
But they know that they spend more money in the long run with problems that these soldiers end up going through or the kids go through. So they're like, well, let's try to nip the money in the butt. It has nothing to do with the genuineness of the people.
Yeah, so the focus is on the soldiers, whether it's VA benefits and whatnot,
Right.
But there's not benefits for the kids. And then if they're young kids, that impacts them the rest of their lives into their 20s and 30s and more, and there's absolutely no benefit for them.
So what did John Krimes get into? Because since I've known you, you're one of the reasons why I came to Christianity, at least one of the bigger reasons.
Right.
And I don't know the side of you that had passed.
Just a lot of hell raising. I was a pretty good student, graduated high school, and all that good stuff, and tried really hard in school. But yeah, after that, when you're 18 and you're free from school, much like my kids now,
Mm-hmm.
they're free to get into trouble, get into things they shouldn't be getting into, just like any normal American teenager, I believe.
Sure.
So a lot of that, experimenting with drugs, this, that, and the other. But there was an event that got me out of that mindset of that lifestyle, and it was the second time our house got raided by the DEA.
How old were you?
I was older, probably 20. I don't know, 23, let's say.
Okay.
22, because I lived at home till I was 26.
You're a young man at this point. Okay.
Yeah. So my dad goes to jail again, and it was only a short period. But at that time, I needed to make a decision on whether or not there was something different in life that I could experience other than what I was taught or what I grew up in. And through that experience, through that challenge of seeing if there was something else, I decided to try to find the existence of God.
So you were making the effort to find the existence of God?
Yeah, through non-Christian means.
Okay.
Right. So, shaved my head.
Became a skinhead?
No. Well,
one of them guys.
Became like a Buddhist type guy. Became a vegetarian, which lasted for 7 years. Very strict vegetarian.
In chasing Buddha. Whatever that would be. I don't know much about it.
No, in chasing the existence of God through other means, right? Through metaphysical experiences.
Meditation, outer body experiences.
Meditation and meditation and the results of meditation.
Okay.
Right. So So I did experience something outside of the physical, which convinced me that there is something spiritual that exists, and that allowed me to adopt a different lifestyle, different change of state of mind, different perspective on a direction of life. So, chased.
I can't tell if we're just going to steamroll through the whole experience of outer body / meditation, metaphysical. I would like to go through that. Is that distracting or what? You see here these heaters?
Is it that heat? Is
yeah,
it the heaters?
It's the baseboards. They're
Okay.
going click, click, click.
Okay.
You hear that? Wow.
Yeah, I do hear it.
My goodness. Okay.
Yeah, I didn't know what that was. I guess it is the heaters.
But yeah, I don't want to just roll through that. If you experience God without experiencing Jesus yet,
yeah,
I'm kind of curious what that is.
Yeah, I can dig into that a little
All right.
bit. I can dig into that a little bit. Yeah, so through this can get long-winded.
Make it short-winded.
I don't know. Yeah, so through that experience of meditation, I discovered a state of mind that transcends space and time, right? And with that experience, I was convinced that there is a spiritual world, that there is more than what is here. And I chased that for quite a long time, looking for the existence of God, found it, or existence of something outside of this physical life, found it, and then continued with that until one day when I was down at in Alabama at Fort Rucker, Fort Novosel. A guy kept bugging me to go to church, and that was the start of my my physical walk with Christ.
Well, but up to that point, so I guess I'm more curious about what was taking place. So during the meditation, what were you experiencing? What was the goal?
Right.
The goal was to see God or feel God? What were you trying to do?
The goal was to determine that there was a spiritual existence to our
Okay, so
physical
just
existence.
something you just wanted to know, hey, this is not it.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Right.
But what was the experience in that?
So the experience was ultimately out of body experiences at will, right, to transcend space and time. In other words, go in the past, go in the future, go to the other side of town,
So
go
you
to
could
the
go
other
in the
side of
past.
the world, right?
Were you able to see it as if a third party, or were you living it?
Experiencing it firsthand.
Again.
Outside, no. Well, right. So to be able to experience it firsthand without a physical body, experience it through just a spiritual existence or means. So I didn't experience the past. I experienced the present without a body. There's a whole, and I don't want to go too deep into into the process.
Mm-hmm.
There's a whole process involved, a process I developed through coupling sleep deprivation and meditation together. Because most people who experience this stuff, for example, monks, will spend an entire lifetime honing this skill set. But I was able to shortcut the experience, the skill set through sleep deprivation and meditation.
It's a super fascinating subject, but the sleep deprivation part of it is what probably makes me think that maybe there was more sleep hormones or chemicals going off. Not that that's what it was. You know what it is? I have never experienced anything like that. And I have heard of people controlling their dreams and stuff like that, right? So there's some type of level of
Yeah, this is
of
beyond
control.
This is beyond lucid dreaming.
Okay.
Well,
And that's what it sounds like to me.
yeah,
honestly.
this is on the spectrum of lucid dreaming, or on the spectrum of an altered state. Lucid dreaming and out of body exist on that spectrum, but this isn't dreaming. This is the physical that we currently exist or currently experience. It's just without the physical body.
Okay.
Right. So what sleep deprivation does is it's sort of a it's not an enhancer. It's sort of a precursor to create to allow you to get into that state quicker.
Is it like bringing your walls down and like your alertness up, or bringing your alertness down, I guess would be the word. So you're not so hyper aware that you can't get out of your body. I don't know. It's just how I'm trying to interpret it. But where if you're more tired, you know how you're easier to drift off.
No. So so science, and I've been away for this for a while. There's 4 states of consciousness. I think it's alpha, beta. It's something theta,
yes.
Whatever.
It's alpha and beta are definitely 2. Yes.
Yeah, theta being the deep sleep.
Theta.
Theta.
My God, I just was saying beta.
Yeah, so you got to get into that state, but in a consciously controlled existence, right? Constantly controlled being existence.
Mm-hmm.
And the sleep deprivation allows you to drop into that state very quickly.
Okay.
And then the meditation is where the control is, so that you don't fall into a dream state. You fall into a controlled state. But it's definitely not dreaming.
So that's probably an entire podcast on its own.
Because
it's such a detailed
subject. And I got introduced to this real quick. There was a guy I worked with at a warehouse who was, probably clinically nuts, but he introduced me to this stuff, and I went down to the Library of Congress because I knew if books existed on the subject, I could find it there. Went down to the Library of Congress in Washington, found a book, read it, started reading it, did some more digging, found out that there was quite a bit of knowledge on the subject from the scientific perspective. Found some guys that were part of the Stargate program, which was an Army psychic training program that was run out of Fort Meade, that they disbanded back in the late 80s. And in the mid-90s, the members of this program were still around, and they were teaching the knowledge of the subject, and came across them. And back then, the internet first came around, which was called Web 1.0. So the only way to communicate, to have any type of interaction on the internet, was through email groups. Joined their email group with, I don't know, there might have been 100 folks, and those guys that were part of the program, the operators, part of the Army program. And they answered a lot of questions and coached us through some of these experiences, and answered what some of our experiences were.
Were you in the military yet at this point?
No.
Okay, so you were dealing with military individuals, or at least those who correspond with them to help the training, but you...
No,
okay.
I wasn't in the military at that point. So, and they helped. You tell them what was going on, and they'd coach you through and say, yeah, that's right, etc. Did that for a while. Kept a journal, many journals of those experiences. To try to document what was going on, to try to learn from it and get better at honing the skill set of having out of body experiences, right? Experiencing the physical without the physical body. Did that for a while, and then at one point I was satisfied with what I was able to do, and
Did you know Jesus at all at
no,
this point?
nope, absolutely not.
Did you know of him?
Yeah, because I grew up Baptist, so went to church and
Okay,
participated
gotcha.
in all those type of church events.
You had like the average American style
Right.
upbringing,
Right, yeah.
No relationship, just I'm
Right.
doing this because I have to.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because it's Sunday. Went to church on a church bus and stuff like that.
Right.
Yeah, so it was good. And then, anyways, I'm not sure where we were going with this, but
Well, I guess I'm trying to understand, when did that stop? Like, how did it stop?
yeah. So how did it stop? So I was got broke, joined the military. I was in the military prior. Lost everything, 2 commercial properties. Decided that I needed to get a foothold to get started back again. Joined the military, joined the Army to get back started, which has worked out fairly well. And through all that, went to some training down at Fort Rucker, met a guy, Mr. Smith, which you'd never be able to find again because it's such a common last name. We were down there for 5 weeks, and he kept bugging me every day to go to church. And I would always sit by myself during lunch and dinner and stuff, and he would always come over and sit with me and just bug me to go to church. And eventually I said, well, I guess I'll go. What can it hurt? So I don't think it's going to do anything, but I'll go with you. So I go to church with him. We go to a Southern Baptist church, and it was a life-changing event that started my path with starting a relationship with Christ. I was in my infancy, quote-unquote infancy, with the relationship with Christ, and and it's bloomed dramatically.
Now, was Mr. Smith a little older?
He was, yeah. He was in Iraq and had all kinds of experiences, and ended up finding Jesus in Iraq.
Well, then I'm just going to put this out there. In case, Mr. Smith, if you are listening by any chance in the future ever, it'd be really great if you could reach out, because you probably know who you are.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that would be amazing to hear you talk about your exchange with him. But
yeah, so that was in 2010, ish, maybe, 11, 10 or 11. Yeah, so I don't know how much, that's 15 years ago, 14 years ago. Yeah, and that's where that was the first. That's where it first started. Trying to get to know Jesus.
Wow, good for Mr. Smith. That's why it's all about just planting the seed, invite.
Yeah, planting the seed.
Try to get them to open up.
Yeah, that
over time it may work.
Yeah, that started it, and then from there, oddly enough, maybe to say that, Christ kept showing up everywhere, and even prior to that, but I'd say roughly a year prior to that, 12 months prior to that, I kept getting people kept trying to plant seeds for a year prior to that, and then he was the last one that were things where his efforts actually stuck. And and then after that, it was I was down at another school for 2.5 months about, and I'm in a hotel, and the old, this was before smartphones. You'd stay in a hotel, and they all had these little clock radios with the red digitized numbers on them.
Right.
And you set the alarm in the morning to wake up to get to school. And what came on was a Christian radio station. To wake up to a Christian radio station, the music was angelic. Looking back at it now, you could tell that there was a purpose to that. I didn't set the radio station; it was just on. It was just when the alarm went off in the morning, that Christian radio station came on, and I'd wake up to that still half asleep, but it sounded angelic. It was very. And I think that was more than coincidence, right? So just small events like that throughout the years. In the beginning, they were leading me in a specific direction without my knowledge. Looking back on it, it's like, well, that had a purpose.
Sure. Did you have a coming to Jesus moment?
Not really.
Some of us do. Some of us don't. And I think it's okay for those that don't. I think that can get, I have a few friends, actually one in particular that's on my mind. He feels that because his testimony isn't like explosive, I almost sense like he's embarrassed in a way. And not like, oh my gosh, people aren't going to think I'm Christian. But I think he feels like, man, I hear so many testimonies where Christ wasn't so heavily involved or made this coming to Jesus moment. And his story is not like that. It's very gradual and very personal.
Mine was very gradual, the same and personal. Right. I think I might have mentioned in the last time we talked, there was a milestone event in my walk with Christ where I just threw my hands in the air and I gave up.
So okay, that makes sense. So then there's a submission even in the right. That makes total sense.
Yeah.
Either way, you're having a submission. Just sometimes you need to be.
It was probably
shook.
It was probably 7 years after that event down in Alabama that the submission event occurred. Right, so where I just gave up and said, "It's on you, God. I'm done. This situation is beyond my wits."
Is this before you experienced war?
No, after.
So you already experienced some type of violence of some sort, right? And now you have the violence, you have the upbringing of having heroin in your diapers.
Right.
So at this point, your exposure to the real evils of the world is pretty extreme. And then now you're submitting to God.
Yeah.
Submitting to Jesus out of all of them. It's like, okay, you had all these other options that you could have attempted to.
Right. So when I was searching for the existence of God, I spent some time in California. I think 3 months. Mm-hmm. Hung out with some Hare Krishnas.
As a Marine or whatever.
As a Marine, okay. Yeah, and and it was good, but they had too many rules to be a part of that group.
Okay.
That you couldn't gamble. I forget what the other ones were, but maybe smoking or something. But there were too many rules for me to participate in that group of people, and they were searching for the same thing too. Right?
But do you think they were right? Like these rules that they were putting on you, do you think that although you weren't ready for those rules, do you think they're correct though in the idea that you should avoid these things?
Yeah, you should avoid them, but they're not a deal breaker.
Okay.
And they made it a deal breaker. In order to be a part of this search for a higher power, you needed to do this and this and this.
All right, so this is why I'm doing the open gospel. This is why I wanted the podcast, because I was under the same assumption in a lot of ways through Catholics, right? And then now I'm hearing you, Baptists, essentially, and around these folks that are implementing these really, they're, I think, real rules. I do believe they're real, but the deal breaker piece,
yeah, when
that's killing people today.
When you say you have to do this in order to have a relationship with Jesus, that's 100% wrong.
Yeah, see, like folks that are non-believers, those that don't believe in Christ because they think it's ridiculous and it's just a bunch of rules, they're not wrong sometimes. It's a turnoff. And it's not that Christ should be a turn on, right? It's a turn off if you're not a believer. You look at it as some type of crazy idea. Like, first of all, it's a crazy idea to believe in a God, right? And I'm saying that loosely. I'm saying that from a point of view of someone who doesn't believe. It's really crazy. Now you're saying, hey, believe, but if you believe, you have to do this, all these things. And it's not easy to give up the world. No. So it's almost like you have to bite it and, eat it like a sandwich, one bite at a time.
Yeah, because you spend your entire life, 10, 15, 20 whatever, how many years developing these habits, and now you're being told you have to eliminate them in a week in order for you to have this experience, and that's incorrect. So when I talk to people about Jesus here, that's what they think. It's like, no, you don't. We're bringing in a homeless young guy in about 30 days or 20 days, and I've been talking to him a lot about Jesus and being able to develop that relationship, or just to have that relationship, and he's stuck on that he can't, because I assume that he feels he's stuck, that he can't have that relationship because of his some of the things he does, his character, and my goal is to convince him that that's not the case. Just start the journey, start the relationship, and these things, if you want to change them, you can change them. You're going to be convicted to change them as the relationship matures, but the first step is to start.
I want to challenge the idea here. I've had a few conversations about that exact topic. I have a friend who said that if you want to be a Christian and you first get introduced to it, you get the wave. A lot of times you get the wave of, I have to make all these changes. And he disagrees with the idea behind that. It's almost like, hey, steady, slow down. My question is this, though. It's not even it's more of a statement, what I'm going to go with. I think that you do have to give up those things. And I think I have a hard time understanding the teaching slow method a little bit. And that, I know that's wrong. Like, hey, I'm going to work on your relationship first, and then Christ will get rid of the rest. And I don't think that's an accurate view. That's me, though, right? I'm thinking that there is work that you must put in. So God is working with you, but it says pick up your cross, and he'll carry it, with you, or pick up your cross every day. And we know Christ is walking with us during that process because he carried it as well. So the symbology behind that, right? But I'm thinking that a new believer that is refusing to really buy into Christ because of all these things, it's too hard to give up. It's too hard. Yes, it is hard.
Yep.
But you do have to.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some inherent knowledge of things that you shouldn't be doing, even as a non-believer, but you do it anyways. What Christ does is, when you start that relationship, you're more convicted to want to, and you will fail, and you will fail every day, every week, not doing what you should be doing.
Sure.
But you can't get hung up on that.
Well, a lot of times the Protestant point of view on this is that Christ will give you a new heart, and he will get rid of those desires to do the thing that's wrong. And I get it where biblically it can back that theology, but I do believe that he is not just going to take away your temptation or he's not going to take away your will.
Right.
So for new believers out there that are struggling, I do think they should know, like, keep going, because that's part of it. Keep struggling. And guess what? You're going to keep failing, right? But you will conquer things here and there with the power of God helping you, but it's your will that's designing to line up with God's will.
Yeah.
As opposed to God's not changing your will. He's not making you do the right thing, or to, hey, this time I'm not going to watch that dirty video. It's not God. That's you saying, hey, I think that this is the right thing. So now it's going to be a challenge, but you can get through the challenge because Christ is going to give you the strength to get through it.
Yeah. Yeah, the challenge is good. The challenge is required.
It is.
And that's what where I'm going is, don't think you can't have that relationship just because you're not perfect. Just like Paul said, I do the things I don't want to do. That obviously he was doing things he shouldn't be doing either.
And he was a follower of Christ, the follower, one of the closest to him.
Right. And even Peter and the rest of them.
Yeah.
They all struggled hard.
But they didn't really explain the struggle the way Paul explained the struggle.
Right.
My goodness.
Right. So it's okay to not be perfect, but it's not okay not to start the journey.
Yeah, but he says, be perfect, as your Father in heaven is perfect, which doesn't mean you can be perfect.
Yeah.
It just means set the bar up here. You should aim to be perfect, and that's it. And you'll fall short. But it's better to aim up here than say, well, I can't change, because I'm just a dirty sinner. So I'm just going to stay down here, and I'm going to keep repeating the mistakes. However, I have Christ, so I'm saved. And that's where it's like you got Jesus wrong. Aim here, and he'll work his way with you. And I guess through the death process, you'll end up being perfect when you die.
Right.
I just, what it is, I'm against that message. I'm against both messages. I'm against the extreme, Christ will completely absolve you. All your sins will be your sinful nature will go away. I'm against that belief that you can get through it with Christ. I'm also against the other extreme, which is what would be the other extreme? I guess Christ is, it's all on you, and Christ is not involved. There's a very unique relationship that the walk is together, right? And I feel like it fails when we say, don't worry about that pornography, or don't worry about gambling. It'll go away.
Yeah, so you can't be a prostitute for Jesus, but you can be a prostitute and be a follower of Jesus until you figure out not to be a prostitute anymore. You can't watch porn for Jesus, but you can be a Christian and watch porn until the desire goes away, which it eventually will, because it's evil.
Right. I think
you can't add evil and Christ together.
And you'll still have to make that decision, though.
You still have to make the decision. Yeah, and so that's the purpose of the living word, right? The Bible. And that's the purpose of the interpreter of the living word, the preacher, to help you acknowledge that what's wrong and what's right. We all need coaching as far as figuring out, understanding exactly what the Bible's saying, and the characters in the Bible, and learning about their struggles and what they went through and what they did to get through their struggles. That's what the purpose of the Bible is to be a guide of how to overcome struggles.
Okay.
Or how to mitigate those struggles, because you'll have them to your deathbed anyways. So, being imperfect, to be a bad Christian, whether it's, even if it's just thoughts, up to your deathbed if you're immobile. But to say that you can't be a Christian because you do this and that is wrong. But as a relationship progresses, you'll be convicted not to get rid of those bad habits. But you also have to recognize that they're bad habits too.
Well, the conviction is the recognition. I mean, we all know what that is, and it's hard to deny that. Okay, I don't know.
And the Bible shows you that, like, man, you shouldn't be doing that because it doesn't align with Him. And if you don't read the Bible a lot or whatever, the preacher's there to help you understand what's in the Bible.
Not to go too far off topic, I guess What about progressive Christianity?
Yeah, so that's
They read it.
That's an interesting one.
They interpret it.
And
then they use the word, and they read it, and yet they still come out with a false message.
Right. So I think it's a misinterpretation. I'm certain of it.
By choice.
By choice, because Satanists also use the Bible, and they misinterpret the messages and the parables. So you could have a progressive church do the same. And there's a lot of discussion on trying to find a true church, or a church that teaches a truer message, because there's a lot of churches out there.
There's a lot of churches.
So some of them do a fantastic job with teaching the truth from the Bible, and some of them probably don't. Just like there's a guy here that went to a Christian church, and they taught them that racism was good as kids, and that became that. Then they backed it up biblically. So, that's definitely wrong,
right.
But that's what they were teaching the kids in this faith-based elementary school. So,
that's so sad.
And it's no different than these progressive churches teaching, homosexuality is normal.
Right.
Not only normal, but it's acceptable.
Isn't the Catholic Church kind of going that direction with the new Pope accepting the behavior as...
Yeah, he is, and I think there's a change coming to that. Supposedly, from my understanding, the Catholic Church cycles between being conservative and being liberal, and they
throughout history.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah,
did not know that.
Yeah, throughout history. They have man-made laws that they put out, and they have God-given laws that they put out.
Sure.
And they teach both, and they have these. They teach both of these laws, and they have their followers abide by both. So when the Pope put that out the other year, it seems as though they're just in part of the cycle where they're being more liberal with their teachings. But supposedly that's going to swing back around.
Maybe during the time of Martin Luther, they were having people pay for their loved ones to get through purgatory.
Right.
Right? So that was pretty much the big gist of all that.
Right.
Well, that was a big push for it.
Right.
Maybe that was just a liberal pope or a series of liberal popes.
Right.
And then that's when the separation took place, when it came back to a conservative view, but it was already, the damage was done.
Right. So that was put out by a bishop of a podcast I just recently listened to on the Sean Ryan show, who talked about the cyclic nature of the Catholic Church, and that goes in cycles of being liberal and conservative.
Hey, I want to get this out because for whatever reason, it's on my heart, right? I do align with that point of view about Scripture guiding you, that Jesus will essentially help you get rid of the sin nature, or at least that he can help you tame some of those desires and all the things that are of the flesh. And the goal is that if you are coming to Christianity, is not to be afraid of the change that will occur at some point in your journey, that just keep going. Even though you feel unworthy, that's okay. We all do, right? And so I don't want it to come off like, oh, well, just because I am backing the idea that you will have to make these changes. And that is a tough pill to swallow. Yes, you can't do the gambling, and I think the gambling is really what it does to your heart. It's not necessarily the guy who goes occasionally hangs out with his friend and throws $100 on black and loses, doesn't care, and leaves. I'm talking about the guy who it takes over. There's a part of him that's like, I want that, and it's like an obsession behind it. So I do think that there is a huge variety of sins out there that you will have to get over and move on from. I don't want to come off like I'm ignoring or I would even say just being ignorant to the fact that there are people that are scared of Christianity because they have to make these changes. So they're like, oh, I can't do it, or I can't be that guy. I get it. So I don't want to come off like I'm extreme the other way either. Do you know what I mean? I felt like it was coming out that way.
Right. So the interesting part to that, if you've got a gambling problem, pornography problem, whatever, etc., addiction problem, once you start with that, once you start on your relationship with Christ, He'll push you in specific directions to eliminate these issues. It just will happen, and if you can separate yourself from your actions and observe it from a third party perspective, you'll see these roadblocks, or that you'll see Him pushing you in specific directions, which is interesting to watch, because you know that it's being done by a higher power for the betterment of you and your family and those around you, and it's interesting to observe and exciting to see, knowing that there is something, there is the creator of the universe, creator of the trees and animals and the planet, that cares enough about you to push you in a direction to make you better. And if you can see that happening, if you can take a couple deep breaths and step away and watch that happen, it's pretty exciting.
We said this before. If you want a joy ride, an interesting life, come to Christ.
That's right. Yeah, I went to lunch with a guy today. We were talking about that same exact thing. He goes, "Your life is so all over the place." I said, "Yeah, it is." Between helping the Afghan families, Afghans, period, and homeless folks, and needy kids, it is definitely not boring. So if you think that being a Christian is boring, you need to submit a little bit more.
Yeah, you have no idea,
and you will find out that it is. It's so. I explain it this way: that it's a complete roller coaster ride. But prior to my relationship with Christ, it was just as reckless. But I was coming off the rails. This feels just as reckless, but it's much more controlled. It's a controlled. It's a life that looks like a mess, but it's got a purpose. Whereas before, without Christ, my life also looked like a mess, but it had no purpose. We're going to hopefully bring in this helpless, homeless young guy out here in a couple weeks, and it's not going to be easy.
No, it's not,
and that's okay, because he needs the help, and I just happen to be the guide to be there to give it to him through Christ.
So Christ prompted you.
Yeah.
So He let it on your heart, like where almost like you can't deny it. You're like, okay.
Yeah. I mean, I can say no, but I told him I could say no, but I'm not going to let this guy live on the street. He's just a young kid that. Young adult that has made bad decisions and has found himself in a really bad spot.
Sure. We all have, and some of us just got lucky not to, or blessed, really, to not go to the next level of whatever that would be. Homeless is a pretty tough one to be in. And drugs.
When you're homeless, it leads you to make decisions that are bad. Mm-hmm. Often, Sometimes being homeless will lead you into decisions to get you lift yourself up by your bootstraps. But other times, then you're getting into prostitution and all kinds of robbing banks or whatever the case might be.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Well, I'm going to pull us back on one topic.
Yeah, sure.
To bring you back, so you did the meditation thing. You experienced spirituality. Did you ever have a run-in with the spiritual connection in that world that was not so spiritual?
Yeah.
good spiritual.
Yeah, so this is a very common experience with those that practice out of body work. You can read about it. Probably Google it nowadays, whatever. So there's a barrier that I think is designed to be there, that when leaving the physical body to experiencing the physical without a body, there's a barrier that you need to move through, not physically, of course. And it is the evilest of evil, the scariest thing. It's like being scared, being the most scared ever times 100.
In the moment of being out of this.
In the moment of exiting your body. And you need to pass through that moment. You need to pass through that experience to experience the physical in the non-physical. And I believe that is placed there purposely. It sounds strange to say that, but to prevent you from experiencing the spiritual in a non-Christian format. Just talked to a guy earlier this week who had the same experience. It was through he was extremely sleep deprived, fell asleep, and couldn't determine the difference between the physical life and his dream consciousness. And these beings were coming after him, and he said they were complete evil. I said, yeah, that's a very normal experience. I know what you were going through. That was normal, and that was purposeful. There was a purpose for that, and those that practice what I practiced experience the same thing.
I'm going to pry just a little bit. So you got sleep deprived. You began to meditate, right?
Yeah.
You left your body.
Right.
What did you experience?
The
terrified part I'm talking about.
Oh, the terrifying part. So, typically, the out of body experience, the procedure practice is done in a sleeping position. I always did it on my back. There's some practices where you do it laying on your side. Those are like Buddhist practices. So laying on your back, imagine being surrounded by, we've all gone to see horror movies, whether it's, Friday the 13th or Freddy, the Elm Street movies, or, Pennywise, or whatever those horror movies are. Imagine being surrounded by those creatures, and now you know that they're not in a movie, but they are there with you, and you can see them, feel them, and they're there.
Are they talking to you?
I don't know, not talking, but you can hear them. It's just straight, and it's dark. And but you have to. So often, what happens once you meditate, you get into a deep state. You go through the procedure of leaving, but right before you leave your physical body, there's you encounter these entities, and often what happens is you are so terrified you just wake up. You just come back. You come back to the alpha state of mind, because it's so terrifying. It's
wow.
So what you have to do is is, grit your teeth and push through these things, and then they're gone, and then you can experience the physical without the physical body. But they're there. That I think it's purposely designed for you to encounter them to scare you back.
Dude, you have to talk to my buddy Carlos. One day I will make sure that happens. He has the spiritual side of things that he talks about. He's a Jew, but I think I told you about him before. He's a Jewish guy who believes that Christ is the Messiah, but not like, he's not God, okay? But his belief system is really, sometimes it seems really out there. But he believes in something very similar, or at least he's explaining something that you were experiencing. And it's, you got the earth, that's the first realm, and there's all these realms. And the next realm, I believe, is like this evil realm that's between you, the next level of heavens, because there's different levels of heavens, right? Which would explain biblically too.
Right.
And then,
right.
But there's this barrier around earth that is like, has a evil presence. It's where they're all stuck essentially, or at least they're all residing in. And it's like, that's why they're hounding. That's why that we have this nature, for example. It's like, he would do much better explaining it. But when you're talking about, you have to, basically you're seeing these things and experiencing a presence of them and then once you break through, then you're able to see more.
Right. That's what it is.
He is on board with that idea, I'm pretty sure. Like he would probably think that you're experiencing what he believes in.
Right. Yeah, so this is a common experience. This guy sounds crazy. Right, whatever. But when other people are telling you the same thing, that have never talked to each other, that have written about it, talked about it, and it's like, well, I experienced that too. It leads you to believe that it's not your imagination, that it's real.
Right. Well, let's go. So, okay, you had that experience. That's pretty wild. And then now you came to Christ, and then from there you finally had a submission moment, and then from then on, it's been just a constant learning, development, and practicing sharing Christ with others.
Yeah.
Were you able to? Okay, so I'm imagining your dad was not a believer in his life.
No, but he found Christ on his deathbed. Thank God.
So how'd that go? So he was not a believer.
No.
Obviously, I mean, if you're practicing life like that, sure. But
yeah.
So how did he come to Christ? Did you have something to do with that?
Planting seeds.
Yeah.
For the last couple years of his life, and then on his deathbed, somebody had him accept Christ, which is good.
Were you there for it?
No, I wasn't.
Oh, that would have been great, but I guess you weren't meant to.
Yeah, so it was
okay.
A couple days before he died. But he was at the funeral and shared the story.
I wonder how,
which is good.
I wonder how your dad felt. So he went a life pretty crime-ridden, right? And then you're on your deathbed, right? And you accept Christ. You have to even really accept him. One is you have to probably zero in on your dirt, and that probably feels pretty heavy.
Right.
At that moment, because you're like, oh my gosh.
The whole life wasted.
Yeah, that's got to be hard.
If that's where your focus is, right? So you can focus on a whole life wasted, which is pessimistic, or you can focus on, okay, this is it. I think I finally figured it out. Even though I only have days left, or whatever the case is, month left, or however long you have left after that. Yeah. So, I've told people, and actually in this college class, written about it in my introduction. At being 51, I'm much closer to death than I am birth. Knowing that I don't really have a whole lot of years left, that my sole focus from here on out is to show other people the peace that Jesus can bring, that only He can bring. And everything else has lost its purpose.
See, that's beautiful, man. I wish us being younger could figure that out. And not all of us are meant. I feel like most people don't experience it younger, don't come to that conclusion.
They don't.
And that's a shame. It's life. But for folks that are young right now, or actually, let's say in their 40s, I'll just talk about guys in their 40s. It is not too late. You still have life. You still have enough time. And even if, like your dad's situation, on his deathbed, that testimony right there, even though he didn't get to give it, was then shared by somebody else.
Yeah.
Who may know somebody who's close, and now there's hope.
Yeah, we shared at his funeral. And
yeah,
my family isn't a bunch of Christians. And I was able to share a funny story because of that, too, in front of my family, extended family, because of that event. So, yeah, no, that moment, even though, it may not have a lot of meaning for him, that it got shared, that I think was, maybe somewhat impactful, hopefully.
Yeah. All of our stories are meant to impact somebody.
Yeah, somehow.
It stinks sometimes because...
even if it's small.
Sometimes maybe you're a little further, and maybe, for me, there are certain things I don't want to face still. I don't want to talk about them necessarily because, I sometimes I'm not proud of my testimony. I feel kind of dirty. So it's like, but it's also an important one for somebody. You know what I mean? I know that it can impact somebody going through the same thing I was going through, or and
right. So
it's tough to swallow sometimes.
That's
man.
an interesting notion. Not being proud of your testimony. Probably nobody is. The Apostle Paul was a killer of Christians. I don't think he was proud of that, but he shared it because it was part of what he needed to share that. So, yeah, there's a lot of ugly things I did too prior to, but and even after,
right?
I guess. But that's the story that people need to know, because this is how people come to Christ. They come to Christ by individuals. I think.
I thought about that.
You can do it. You can do it as a preacher, and try to and well, even a preacher's doing it as an individual, but it occurs by one Christian working with a non-Christian, and then one Christian working with another non-Christian, and whether it's just planting seeds or maybe it's more, but it happens on the individual level.
I think part of the belief system out there, and I could be completely wrong, I'm not going to go and immediately think that all atheists or people of other faiths, part of me thinks that they're not acknowledging the fact that they will face God one-on-one. Now, to me, that is very scary. It's going to be one-on-one, me and the God who created me, and to me there's a bit of a you don't have help. You don't have somebody going to be speaking on your behalf. And I'm talking Jesus' will to the Father, but I'm saying you still have to, you're going to be meeting with your Creator. Jesus is part of that. All by yourself. And I feel like these, I would say atheists, or I hate to pinpoint just them. I feel like I shouldn't. But they're just the example. That if, let's say they were to come to some idea of, okay, God's real, but I don't want him. They're thinking like there's some type of teamwork going on, like they're going to have a friend going in the afterlife, like, oh, hell, I'm going to go with my friends in hell.
All right.
And to me, it's like, what makes you think that you're going to have your buddy or your mom or your wife or anybody in that moment of judgment between you and your Creator? And that is sometimes, this is a recent thought. Somehow we got here now, but I was laying on the bed and I'm thinking, like, just laying there. I'm just me and my thoughts. No one else is with my thoughts except me. And of course, God, who's able to be involved and he knows what I'm thinking. And that thought was just like, wow, when I'm done here, you can try to hang on to everyone you love here as much as you can, but it's that, you're going by yourself.
Right.
You die alone
Right.
to answer to your creator. That's such a strange thought, man. It's deep. It's terrifying.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. So that life review moment, which many religions believe in, is, and we talked about this in the last one, is meant to be. It seems to be as though it might be a washing, a cleansing moment before you move on to the perfect place, heaven. That you have to be cleansed of all the wrong that you did by re-experiencing it. And it is it will be a lonely moment experience, but is required. Seems as though it's required to move on to where things are perfect. But what if? So the Christians, per se, get through that moment, that dirty moment, by reliving everything bad. Move on then through Christ to heaven. But if you don't believe in Christ, that dirty, ugly moment of reliving doesn't. You can't take God's hand and continue on. You get stuck in that.
I love how you just brought that up. That is a wonderful way to explain that.
Isolated, yucky experience of life, which is, similar to the description of hell.
So Jesus is going to essentially, after death, he will remove that burden.
Right.
So, but you're going to experience it.
Right.
But then he removes it, which is the final cleansing. The final, you're pure. Now you're purified because you went through the process of, you experienced it, he removes it, you move into the house. Now you're clean.
But if he doesn't remove it because you won't allow him to.
You don't want him to.
You're stuck.
That would be terrible.
Living a horrible, or experience a horrible existence after that, which is hellish, right?
Man, that's...
Maybe.
What a great way to explain it.
Maybe. Yeah, so... Yeah.
So your dad...
And all you have to do is accept him. That's the only...
So your dad came to it right at the end there. That is a wonderful thing, because you know what? I think it may not be... Because there's a lot of people that would be very upset with that thought process. Like, that's unfair. They would think that. But the truth is, that is a beautiful thing. Because now he's going to go. He will feel it.
Right.
And he went...
Absolutely.
Like, people think, oh, he just got off scot-free. No. He is feeling that. But Jesus will remove it.
Right.
That, like, what a wonderful thing that he doesn't have to suffer for eternity.
Right.
Like, everyone should be happy about that. Everyone should be grateful that they don't have to suffer for eternity. If that guy can be saved, guess what? You can be saved. The person you love can be saved. Like... But you have to do it here on earth, I think, because the moment you accept him, at least the idea, like, oh, okay, Christ, I think there's a good shot. He is real. I accept him as my Savior. If this is going to happen, I want him. That moment, like, that's okay. Well, then that's freedom. Like, that's what it is. Like, I don't understand why anyone would be upset with the idea that a guy can live his whole life in sin and at the end die. Well, accept Christ and die, and they're just forgiven. Like, I don't understand where the thought process comes up. But for me, it's like, that is pure freedom to be able to go ahead and do that. Not that it's intentional. If the guy is planning, I'm going to go my whole life, and on my deathbed, that's it. I'm going to just accept Christ and boom, wash away all. That's not how that works. It's the guy who really didn't care. His whole life didn't care about Christ at all. And then he acknowledges, like, uh-oh, I have a problem here. Like, what a beautiful thing, to that God will forgive him, because then it means he will forgive you.
Yeah. Well, that's the parable in the Bible where it talks about the workers that are, they got hired in the beginning of the day, and some other workers got hired midday, and some other workers got hired at the end of the day, at the 11th hour, but they all got paid the same wage. So the workers that got hired in the morning were complaining that, hey, these guys that got hired at the 11th hour got paid the same as I did. Why? And Jesus explains in this parable, it's not for you to complain. It's not for you to understand that why the business owner, the owner of the fields, however he puts it, made that contract with the guys that worked for an hour and got paid the same as you. That's not for you to understand or to figure out. It's just that's the deal that was made, and it is what it is. It's the same as the guy that accepts Christ on his deathbed, or the guy that accepted Christ when he was 12 years old. The end result's the same, and that's not for anyone to complain about it being unfair. It's just the deal that's available, and it is what it is. So,
man,
yeah, it's not for us to understand why somebody can go through life being a rotten person and then also get to heaven. The guy that was hanging on the cross with Jesus accepted Christ on the cross.
He did.
That's good enough. That's good enough.
And he said, "You will be with me."
Yeah.
But
you can't go through life thinking that's what you're going to do.
Right. Well, I think, let's say you do. Let's say you go through it with that intention. And then when you come down to the end and you're like, oh my goodness. And all of a sudden there's that realness that's coming to it. And you're like, I know I've been mocking this my whole life, joking about this moment. But now it's serious. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, Jesus, I want to accept him because I'm thinking that maybe I've been wrong this whole time. Well, then that person can be accepted too. Right. Just because you're mocking them and playing, it's like...
Right. So what happens to that person is what happens to that person. He goes through life saying, okay, right before I die, I'm going to accept Christ. Mm-hmm. And a lot of young kids think that. Yes, teenagers, whatever. Because they want to still live the lifestyle they want to live. But they know, because they went to church enough times, they know that there's more. If you go through your life thinking that you're going to be convicted to be better, you're a believer, you understand what's coming, but you still refuse, but you still understand it.
True. A lot of the sins that we fight today, or actually all of human history, we don't want to accept that they're wrong here, even though they're telling you they're wrong. Everybody, it could be, okay, homosexuality, for example, the gambling, the alcoholic, all these things we're like, yeah, I know what the Bible says, but I don't think he meant it that way. So you start rewriting scripture in your mind of how to fit your agenda. Like, it can't be wrong. God loves me. It can't be wrong. Right. But I'll be honest, I feel like it's like a child who doesn't align with their parents when they say, hey, you shouldn't be hitting your brother or sister. And that child's like, I'm going to do it anyway, because they don't believe that their parents are accurate in their interpretation of whatever. They're not supposed to strike their sibling. I'm using that as a kind of an extreme, right? Mm-hmm. But or swearing even. Like, you grow up, start swearing, and your parents are like, hey, watch your mouth. You shouldn't be saying those things. But your friends are all doing it. So to me, it's like, I don't think they're right. But you might come to the conclusion when you're an adult and go, wait a minute, I think my parents were actually right. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry, Dad. Like that, now you're coming back to it. But you have to acknowledge it at some point. And so for folks today that maybe are struggling with some type of sin and they don't believe it's in here, I mean, maybe it's just a phase. Just don't die in that phase. You know what I mean? Because you might die with that belief. But if you were to, you may come to the conclusion that you were wrong. I think a lot of folks do.
Yeah.
And we might not hear about it. You just see what's on the news.
Right.
Everyone's jamming it down your throat. Like, everyone agrees that this is all okay. Yeah, it's on camera, I guess, and there's a couple people behind this person that's running for president, and you're like, oh, all these people believe in it? No, it's just pan out, and it's a fraction.
Right.
So at the end of the day, I think a lot of folks go through their life, and maybe this goes back to us talking about how you don't have to swallow everything that Christ is going to throw at you in this word. You just have to start, and he'll work on it with you. But yeah, it's a belief system that I guess changes over time. But there's no gray area in this Bible. We create one. And that, I think, is where we're at today in society, currently in America at least, is that we're creating gray areas because we don't align with it, because we want to keep partying and having a good time. But at the end of the day, you will accept it. And if you don't, okay, well, then you're going to stay with that guilt when it does happen. You know? I don't even know if I said that right.
Yeah.
I was just like, all around.
All these things you're talking about are individual experiences, right?
Right.
So can you be homosexual and get to heaven? Sure. I don't see why not. Does it mean that you're wrong? You know, that's a different question.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, you can be ignorant. You can also be better.
Yeah.
And whatever that better means, right?
Absolutely.
I guess it's defined in the Bible what better is. But if you're not willing to accept to be better, but you think you are, you know, who am I to call out your faults?
The reason why I say what I said about how they are twisting the word is because I've done it. I've done it. I've committed certain things in my life that I literally looked at Scripture and I thought the exact same thing everybody else thinks when they're trying to avoid it, is that's not what he meant. Or I know he says this, but it's between me and God.
Right.
There's like a certain, I manipulated the word of God so that I can keep going until I couldn't go any further. And I think my hope is that everybody can get to that point where they can stop for a second and realize that, okay, I'm wrong, and I'm done changing the Scripture for my life to fit my life. I'm done.
Yeah. So Johnny Chang says it like this: if it's something you want to do, it's wrong. I think it's pretty straightforward.
It is.
If it's something you want to do, it's wrong because if you want to do it, it's being driven by the ego, and the ego is opposite of Christ. The ego is of the world. The ego is the dirt that we were created from.
I struggle with that.
Rather than the spiritual part of us.
What if you want to help the homeless guy because it's in some way helping? But it's not doing God's work. But
it's not because it's not because of what you want to. So, you know.
Or are you thinking there's the ego there saying, well, God's going to see it, so.
Right. Yeah.
It's then again going back to.
It falls short, right? So when we bring this homeless young man into our home, hopefully, it's not something I want to do. It's something that I feel I have to do. It's something that I feel that God is telling me to do. What I want to do is have an empty house with just my wife and I. But our little 4-year-old screws that plan up of having an empty house. But he needs us, and we need to do God's work by taking care of him. Of course, he's a joy too. I'm not going to say for a second that we don't absolutely enjoy him, our 4-year-old. But that's not, he's not he doesn't work into the plan of having of personal enjoyment of just having an empty house with just my wife and I, coming home from work, and he makes a mess and talks back, and some moments it's like life would be easier without you. My point is this: if it's something you want to do, it's not God talking. That's your ego talking. If you want to do it, and that probably exists on a spectrum too.
Sure, and I also think that maybe that has to be meditated on for every individual, because I could see how someone could take that out of context too and be like, well, I want to not be so angry, or I want to, and so you're saying that's not God. Of course but that's not, I don't think that's what this is referring to.
Right.
I think it's more or less action. When the moment that you're going to get angry.
Often angry people want to be angry. People that have
in the moment.
People who have road rage want to have road rage.
Now the repentance of that, which is the guilt and all that stuff that sets in, you're like, I don't want to do that anymore. I want to be good. That's God still working. That's God. But in the moment of where the flesh takes over, it's like, I'm going to flip out on this, or your kid. It's like, that is you.
Yeah.
It's your ego.
I want to flip off this guy that just cut me off. That's not.
Dude.
I want to do that.
Wow.
That's not. So whenever you want to do something, according to Johnny Chang, it's your ego talking.
Yeah, I guess you know what? I hope someone can listen to this and actually meditate on it. Literally meditate on what you're saying. I think because there's a crossover between where, let's say we use the angry driver guy, flips off, you get, first of all, you get cut off, you snap like naturally inside, and you're like, and you grab that wheel and you're like, okay, I'm gonna show this guy. You know what I mean? You can't help it. You get so passionate in the moment, and it is 100% about you. Mm-hmm. So you're going to get yours. So you do your thing, you get out, and you lay it into him, and you're like honking at him, and you're saying stuff he can't even hear you because you're on 95, and it's like you see someone flipping out, but it's actually you're swearing up a storm. And then afterwards, so you just did what you wanted, and now you pull as you slow down or whatever it is that you're in. And if you're a Christian, this generally happens. Then God shows you what he wanted. And that's where it all comes in. It's almost like you do what you want, God shows you what he wants. It's like that reaction every time.
Right.
And then now you hope the next time that guy cuts you off, hopefully it crosses your mind where you say, you know what? I shouldn't do this. But you go ahead and do it again. And then 1,000 times later, you finally are able to say, I hope that guy gets home safely, and I hope that, because now I don't want to bless him, but I'm going to bless him.
Right.
I don't want to bless him. I want him to roll over, smack that windshield.
Yeah.
You think horrible things.
Yeah. Get pulled over.
I'm showing I'm showing you what I think sometimes. I'm in Philadelphia, so driving in Philly around the stadiums, ripping up on 95, I became a super Philly driver again. So old habits die hard, bro. I'm aggressive. Like, because if you're not aggressive, there's really no reason to be aggressive. I have nothing for that.
Yeah.
I don't know how to lay off anymore. It's because it's gotten to, it's part of me. I get cut off every 2 seconds. I get honked at. If you're like not one of those go, go, go type, you're a nuisance on the road. Can't even do a speed limit. God, if you're doing 55 on a 55 in the right lane, not bothering anybody, you're still going to have the guy who's super riding your tailgate, right? And he's just, you can tell he's doing, looks like NASCAR, where the guy, the front driver, and everyone behind you is like this, and you're in the slow lane doing the speed limit. Yeah, good luck. So you start to learn how to adapt to your environment.
Yeah.
And maybe that's why Jonah didn't want to go to Nineveh. Because he was like, I don't want to adapt to their environment. I don't want to become them. And actually, I think it was. He didn't like them. He wanted them to be punished. Oh, there you go. Right back to Jonah. And what's his name was saying? Johnny Chang. Mm. Jonah didn't want to go to Nineveh. God wanted him to.
He was told to.
And he said, I don't want to. So he did what he wanted. Ego took over. Boom, he's on a ship. And God just takes his ship and just rocks it, right? Scares everybody on the boat. So everybody he was surrounded by was terrified. Like, what is happening? What did you do? I know what I did. I'm going to go do what God wanted me to do, even though I don't want to do it. Throw me off the ship. And then, of course, 3 days in the whale, got that punishment. You're going to soak in it for 3 days. He soaked in it, right? Some say he died because it says sleep. Maybe. Regardless, he pops out and does what God wanted him to do. But he still felt out guilt from not doing it in the first place. One is he fell on the ship, then he got thrown and got the punishment, essentially, of whatever it was that he was sulking in. Could have been sulking for 3 days, right? Of just like, wow, I did not do the right thing. Just like that guy on 95, that Paul Amaratus, just white-knuckling, trying to get next to this guy. And it's like, wow. Whatever. Well, dude, this was a much better direction, I think, that we had today. It was a better organized podcast. I'm learning, everyone, so be patient with me. I don't really care if I get followers. I don't care if I get subscribers. I don't care about any of that. More or less, I'm getting better at speaking about God, I'll tell you that. And one thing I really want to learn is how to make sure that I get wise enough scripturally that I don't lie or misguide. We're all learning. I don't want to be the guy that's on a podcast. Let's say this got big. I don't want to be like, oh, well, I don't want to look back on these episodes and cringe. And I probably will. There's probably going to be times where I'm like, ooh, I can't believe I thought that or believed that. Or, ooh, I misquoted. And I taught false. Do you know what I mean? Because if someone's listening to this and they're like, I'm interested in learning about Christ, but this guy, everything he told me is a lie now. Like, I feel like, so that is one thing I do hope to really grow from this. So if I don't have any followers or anybody that really takes anything out of it, okay, cool. I tell you what, I hear myself after I'm done all this. Sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm listening to myself and I'm so disappointed because, I thought I was more versed. I have some really good conversations with folks off this. And sometimes the fire is just real.
Right.
And so I do wonder, like, man, how many times have I misspoken? Probably a lot. How many times have I misguided or missed the opportunity to tell somebody the truth? But I did what the ego did to twist it in a way where I'm almost like in agreement with someone so that they don't get turned off from Christ. So I'm going to lie and go around the truth so I don't turn them off from God. You know how terrible that is? That's terrible. You should be telling them the truth and be okay with it. Just because they don't believe it, okay, so. But I should be able to tell you what I believe and not worry about hurting feelings or anything like that. So I come up with these, how do I see the scripture to be able to turn it around? And it's like, no. Just be straight. This is what the scripture says. That's it. And maybe study scripture more. Read more. Study it so that I'm not able to help somebody with it. Because there's so many times where I'm like, man, I don't know enough. And I know I don't. And I don't think I'll ever know enough. That's okay. But I'm excited to get this thing going. I appreciate you being my first repeat guest, really, to give me the ability to keep practicing. Because I don't know what God has in store for me.
Yeah, the discussions are good.
That's all. Right. This is a real discussion. It's real talk. And I'm trying to be as transparent what I'm actually thinking. But there's times where I'm like, should I be sharing what I'm thinking? It's a little terrifying because maybe some of these internal thoughts should stay internal, or maybe these should stay offline because they're a little potentially radical in some way. It's like, wait a minute, or not. Maybe I should just talk it out so that I can see the growth over time too, because maybe there's some guy out there that might be like, oh, he came a long way. I remember when he believed this other thing. But through conversation and time, like, I like to see people develop too. There's There's a lot of folks that develop in their Christian walk, and it's like, wow, that's impressive how he was used to believe this, and now he's coming around to this. It's to me. So maybe I need to just kind of own it. I'll own it. I'm not a preacher. I'm not a pastor. I'm not a teacher. I'm a Christian who's just very inspired to talk about God and to use the word for it, and that's it. I'm inspired, but I'm not a teacher, so no one should be taking my word for any type of truth. I'm not. I don't think I have that type of vocation, but I do have I think a calling to get the conversation going, and maybe one day I can interview pastors, priests, all of them too. I would love to have them on a show just to ask questions, and learn. I want to learn. So that's hopefully the intent of all this. I hope I don't mislead someone or turn someone away from God because of my personal interpretation. So, but again, thank you.
Yeah, sure. It was
you have
fun.
anything else you want to say?
No.
No? Okay. Well, it's been a pleasure, John, and I think maybe in a few drills we'll do it again.
Sure.
Because it's good for me, and I know you enjoy it too. So.
Yeah, I've got a lot of stories.
I'm sure you have a lot.
In retrospect, they are tied into where I'm at right now.
Yeah.
Which I think I'm at a pretty good spot with reflecting God's light to others.
Absolutely. I think you are too, man. You're a great mentor. You're a great friend. And I think you do have, I think all Christians have a calling to do God's work. But I think everyone has a different style of call, whatever that may be. But I do believe your calling is to be very personal with folks. You know what I mean? To be, what's the word I'm looking for? Like,
yeah. So
relatable.
Relatable.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some preachers preach well.
Sure.
And get the gospel out.
And you might not be relatable to them. Like, you might not be able to relate. But that's fine, because that's their calling is to be able to teach it, like you're saying. And then there's guys like you who are doing the groundwork in the field.
Yeah. Just going through life.
Who, right.
Not being a missionary.
Sure.
In a foreign country. Just being a missionary to and from work and home.
Sure. And if you can get them to see you, then you say, hey, I know a pastor. After some time, they come to the pastor, and further that pastor leads them to Christ. So it's like you got all these levels and people and different variances out there to get people to Christ. That's why I think the idea of a calling for everyone is so vast, man. You don't know what you are destined to be, but you definitely have a role somewhere in that chain of command to bring somebody to Christ. So all you have to do is keep introducing them to the next person, or if Christ, if possible. But not everybody's ready for that.
Right.
And they just, boom, get a pastor, and then they have some true professional guidance too. So I don't know any. I mean, I know a couple pastors. They're good guys.
Yeah, and the pastor's job is really to get them closer to Christ.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because pastors aren't saving anybody. Neither am I or you.
Right.
We're just planting seeds.
It's like the military, man. We got our privates, got our squad leaders, platoon leaders, right? And then you move all the way up to commander, and then to 4-star president. And you got God. He's the president. He's just like working all his people to be able to do their job. We all have a job. So, well, thanks, John.
Yep. It was good.
Appreciate it, man.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah, man.